everyone. Welcome to another edition of Power Baseball League. Today, Malcolm and I are going to be talking about setting up some custom entities and custom fields and all that fun stuff. So on our last video, we had the creation of a model-driven app with our core account and contact and activity entities, but there's still a few additional things that we need in our app. So that's what we're going to look at today. To start, let's look up our data map that we worked on a few sessions ago and see what we have. So I think our players, these are going to be our contacts, right? Maybe we should write that.
Yeah.
And then I think what we thought we'd create today is maybe our registration entity.
Yeah.
And kind of go from there.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that, and maybe the year of play, I think, is the other thing that kind of came up as something that we're going to need to make sure we have so that we can put the right information in for each year.
Perfect. Do you think we should also, maybe while we're here, we could rename our players to contacts? That would be a good helpful thing. Cool.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so let's jump on over to our system. So we're already in our Power Baseball League environment, and we're going to go into a solution. So important to remember, all these changes should be in a solution because we're trying to keep things classy. And hopefully we also are working, in a dev environment and moving to your production. But that's a whole problem for another day.
Yeah, and if we had, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we can't forget, we also need to add these entities we create to our model-driven app after.
Yeah, agreed. And what I was going to toss out is if you're working with a partner or other collaborators on something like this, if possible, have your own solutions that you're working in so that you're not writing things on each other or doing things to each other's solution that the other's not aware of. So you're kind of operating in your own playground, if you will.
Great call out. Should we also be creating a publisher today?
It's funny, we should, and I should have done that when I set it up and I created that solution, and I didn't as we were going through, as I was recording it. And after the recording, I thought, oh, shoot, I should redo that and add that solution. And we thought, you know what, we'll call that out on the next video and we can go in and create one.
And here we are.
Now, so here we are.
Let's just create a new solution. I think you can update the solution or update the publisher on existing solutions, but it's a little bit easier on a new solution. So let's just do that. We'll call this custom stuff, where the other one was just our whatever. Let's add in our new publisher. So the publisher is important because that controls the prefix and option value prefix. That's not as important, but the important part is this prefix that's going to show up on your custom fields, custom entities. So when you're working with a partner or something, it's good to be able to tell what stuff they brought into your system by their prefix versus things that you have in your system with your prefix, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And those that are, that your partner probably has their own, you have your own, and then the systems out of the box stuff has the new underscore in it. Or not the new underscore. It would have whatever your solution, whatever the default one is.
I've also done big projects where all internal, and I just created a new solution to have a different prefix for everything for that project so that all my fields would nicely stay together.
Oh, nice.
All right, so any objections to this prefix?
Nope, that's what I had in my head too, PBL.
I feel like that is a prefix for something else, but I can't remember. Or I feel like that's an acronym for something else that I don't remember. That's a problem for another day. And we don't need to add in any of these things right now.
Nope.
But you can fill in descriptions and things for your solutions if you want. Especially, if you're moving things between environments. All right, so let's create a new entity. And we're going to create a registration entity.
Yeah, so the intent of this entity would be to capture a player's, or perhaps even coaches. We haven't really talked a lot about that yet, but a player's registration. So we'll get the player in the system, but then every year that goes by, they're going to register and come back, and basically tell us, yes, I'm coming back to play this other season, and here's what level, or I mean, as we build out the fields, we'll solidify all that. It's all in our mapping doc, but that's really the intent of this one.
Cool. So when our entity gets created, there's some of this stuff that automatically gets created for us, these fields. And then we can add in the additional fields we need. So I did leave the default with name being our primary field. We could have potentially changed that, but I think that's probably fine.
Yep.
So let's jump back to our data map. So what else do we want to put on our registration?
Well, interestingly, when we mapped this out, we started really high level, right? And then, but we also, for that, we're going to want to pull in the information from the application that the association actually uses. And we didn't have that at the time of creating this, which is why this looks so high level. I mean, those are good. That's a good start. The date, the amount paid, and what level they're going to play. We'll probably want, I mean, we're going to need to know how to link that to which contact. So we're going to need a link to the contact. So that means we're going to need a relationship between our contact record and this registration. And what I said a minute ago, every player who comes back every season to play another season is going to need a new registration. So that, I think, then we're going to need a one-to-many relationship between that contact and the registration entity that we're creating.
Yeah, let's do that first, and then we can add in any of the other fields we need. Because I think like date, we might be able to use our created on as the date field.
Yep.
But the contact is one we can't get away from. So do we want to call that player or player applying or something like that?
On the registration, so I guess we need to kind of tackle whether or not we're going to use this for coaches as well. So we definitely are going to want to have an application process around coaches so we can vet them and whatnot. Now, I guess the question is that the same as a registration? Perhaps it's different. So maybe we put that off and tackle that a little later. And if that's the case, and I'm literally thinking a lot as we go through this. So if that is the case, then I think player is fine because this registration entity would really be that player registration for the upcoming season.
Yeah, and I think the open question that's still in there is if our coaches would be contacts or if they would be a different custom record type, right?
Right.
But if they would be contacts, then it might make sense for this to, maybe we should call it applicant or something like that to be safe.
Yeah. Applicant makes sense. I think that applies to both players and coaches.
We'll relate that to our contact. But I think that's a good call out because we were also talking about renaming our contact to player or something like that, which probably wouldn't make sense in this case, right?
Right.
All right. And this guy's going to be required, so we can
absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
And I don't think we need to update any of these things yet, but we can look at the settings related to that relationship after we create it. One thing that's really cool in the new Maker portal, I guess it's not really new anymore, but in the Maker portal is so now if I made a mistake, like if I spelled applicant wrong, which I don't think I did, then I can still edit it now before it's been saved and before my kind of schema name has been created. Whereas like any of these guys, which
have been saved,
they've already been saved. You can't do that. So it's good
I didn't
for
know
people
I
like
didn't know
me
that
who make mistakes.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing that you could do that. Because how many times have you been created a field and been hampered by the fact that you put an extra character in, or you realize that you didn't pick the right name, and you're like, oh, I should have actually called it this in that moment. Ideally, that doesn't happen because you've planned it out, but it does happen.
And then you only have one long save wait instead of waiting between every field.
Yeah.
So I think there was one other field we for sure wanted to create, right? That was going to be Oh, the amount paid. That'll be a
Amount
good one
paid,
to
yep.
go ahead and create. Add that now. We can go ahead and make that a currency.
Mm-hmm.
That'll probably be, let's set that recommended just because.
Sure.
Do something different. And then what we'll see is when we save this, our amount paid, we're actually going to get a few extra fields because currency fields are funny like that.
Yeah, we should get the amount paid base.
Yeah.
Show up in there. All right, so those two are now created. Great.
Yeah, and we can check the, I think we can check the relationship settings. Oh, sorry, I'm going the wrong place. We can look at the applicant relationship that we have created and make sure it's right. So right now it's many to one, which is correct, multiple registrations to one contact. But we also have the ability to control this type of what we call like cascading behavior, right? So if a registration is deleted, then what happens to the contact and vice versa. So I think for this case, we're okay with the default, but that'll be something in your organization you want to be looking at. And I think generally all of this, we're creating this on the fly, but maybe that probably not a best practice to do. So just a reminder to be thinking about those kind of relationships in advance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Okay, now, go ahead.
ahead.
I was going to say, do we want to jump into a form? Do we want to design a form, or do we need that just yet?
Sure. We can do a quick form because we only have a few fields on here, right? So let's just take our main form and we'll add in, okay, we'll sign in.
It keeps happening to me too.
Get our main form and let's zoom in. Cool. So we can add in our new fields. We want our applicant, we want our amount paid, and we want to display our created on because that'll also be our time.
Yep.
I don't know if we care about owner. We can leave it there for now because maybe it'll become the coach or somebody reviewing or something.
Yeah, it probably doesn't make too much of a difference right off the bat, but I think when in doubt, would you say leave it on, or when in doubt, take it off? I think my head immediately goes to take it off and see if you miss it. So if you take owner off and you find as you're working through the entity, you realize you really wish you had that data, because I think the reverse is to leave it on there and I don't know that you would realize that you're using it as much as you'll realize that you're missing it, if that makes any sense, right? So if you're not sure, I think a good practice would be to just remove it off the form. And if your users are saying, hey, I really wish I had that on there, we can bring it back down the road.
Yeah. Okay. Let's remove this guy then.
Now I was going to say, does it make a difference so that we're dealing with a required field? So because it's a required field, we can't just pop it off.
Yeah. Let's leave him for now, but we could make him not required and then remove him if we wanted to.
Perfect.
Now let's save and publish him. And then the other thing we wanted to create was the session /year.
Yep. Yeah, and if we pop over maybe back to your to that the mapping document for a sec.
Yep.
Because I don't remember what all we had on that.
We decided.
I think for starters, I mean, really the intent here is just to be able to have a list of the years, or whether it's a pick list or a lookup. I think we decided lookup, which is why it's its own entity, because we're likely to be referencing it on multiple records. But we could use we could look at a global option set, right? Would be an option.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about. Because if all we needed was kind of a consistent set of seasons that's available across every entity, then a global option set would work. The only question is if we need to capture any additional data there, which maybe we want to capture total registration dollars, like roll up information, or capture the number of teams. I don't think for phase one, I think a global option set would be fine, but I also want to plan for the future. So maybe we should create it as a separate entity.
Yeah, I like the idea of roll up data around
Yeah.
that because as we get into our, down the road, we'll talk about fundraising and donations and things like that. And
Right.
and if somebody's making a donation toward a specific season or a specific year, are we going to put that on there? Which I think is a little bit different than, compiling data or reports on when
Yeah.
did the donation come in, right? So I think that makes good sense.
Perfect. Okay, we can create that. One other note you'll see here, as soon as we created that relationship with the contact here, that contact entity gets added to our solution. So that's just something to be aware of, especially if you're working in kind of a big system with lots of moving pieces, that if you're going to create one of these relationships, you might want to add in your entity first so you can remove some of the components, because when it gets brought in by default, it puts everything in there, which we probably don't need. But it's what happens. Cool. Okay, so let's create our season, right? That's what we want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And do we want our display name to be called name? Maybe we want to call it, I guess name is fine. And we can see here some of the other settings that I didn't look at last time. We have the option to enable attachments and notes. A lot of these things you don't have to enable now. We can enable them later. We can also do things like choose if the entity will be a regular entity or if it's going to be an activity entity, meaning it is a type of activity. Or you can also set up the ownership, which relates to security and all of that. I think this could actually be an organization entity.
I think so too, yeah, because this is going to be applicable across the board.
Right. And then you can also configure all these things. The important thing to note here is if they have this little symbol, it means that they can't be disabled after you turn them on. So just be careful if you turn those things on, because you might decide you don't want them later.
Yeah, and that's where planning really comes into play, right? So take time to look through all this and really think about what they all are. You'll notice a little information toggle beside each one of those. If you're not sure, look that up, do some research. Just decide now whether you're ever going to want those or not. Because if you, again, once you've made your decision and turn them on, you can't turn them off.
Right. But I can turn them on later, so I don't need to panic yet. But I think we're good. All right, so that's getting done in the background. So we can start adding our field. So do we need any other fields right now? Do we want to create one of those? I guess we need our relationship to the registration, right? But we're going to create that at the registration level, right? We won't be creating that at the season level. So let's jump back to our registration. That. We'll do a lookup again. Keep typing. I might need to. Let's find out if I should have published. Oh, there we go. Perfect.
So that description field is going to come up as a tooltip. Is that still the case? So if we're in the actual solution and we hover over the field, it used to be that the description content, whatever was typed into that field, would show up as a tooltip. I actually don't know if that's still the case in the new version.
Actually, not positive either. I think it is, but let's check it. We can check it in our model-driven app.
Yeah.
All right, let's add this guy to the form.
Perfect.
Okay. Let's see.
I've been seeing it's been weird lately, and I don't know if it might just be a my computer thing, but those tooltips when you hover over fields are showing up way out of the whack, out of whack. So if I hover on a field over here, the tooltip's popping up nowhere near where my cursor is. Usually it's attached to your little cursor, your arrow, whatever you have, but it's been way on the other side of my screen, which has been super bizarre. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. If it's not showing up right there, it may be
Fighting with us.
somewhere else. And so I talked over what you're doing there. So you're adding the app to our solution because we now need to go in and we also need to add the things that we built in there, right?
Right. Yeah. And we could have done this in our other solution, but let's just put it all in one place.
Yeah.
To keep it together. Okay, let's add in our, oops, I was trying to do things I couldn't do. Oh, guys, I'm clicking too fast. All right, we're gonna add in our registration. Scroll, 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 scroll.
That'll be in the
Oh, hey, look, I can search. Yeah, testing my alphabet skills on a recorded line. And I think we can add in our season, although the other thing we're going to have to do with these entities is figure out the security for them.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so for all these guys, we can determine which forms we want. I think we only have one for each of them.
Yeah,
so.
we didn't do any extra forms or anything, and we haven't done any views or anything. So we'll have to circle back to that because they're definitely, especially around like season, or not season, sorry, registration data by season. We're gonna want some views, registrations this season, registrations next season, that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
we'll build those in a future state.
Let's publish all before we play that app and see what happens.
So pretty straightforward to go through and add a couple of quick entities. Nothing major on our Visio document or on that mapping document. There were a few other entities that we want, but we're trying to keep these bite-size, these videos. So what you may find is in a future video, we've maybe added in some of the others, but we wanted to give you a taste of how to go in and add these elements in. So we've gone ahead, built in a couple of entities and bits of information, and now we're ready to play that app. And so this is going to be the actual user experience.
Oh, did I miss a step?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not seeing my.
So if we go to contacts.
Yeah, we don't see our new entities yet. Oops, what did we miss? We can check your tooltip though. Yep. They're working. They still do that.
So yeah, why doesn't that show up? So you added it to the app.
Let's check. Let's check we did it right.
You saved.
Oh, we didn't add it to the sitemap though.
Oh, that's why.
That's why. Right. And we're gonna call this something different because I don't want it to say new area. Add a new group. Is that what I want to
add? Yeah, over on the left, we'll go to add.
Oh, I'm clicking the wrong buttons. I'm going to be selecting. I don't want an area. I want a new group.
I think I had to click click on contacts, for example. Oh, there we go. Okay.
There we go. And we'll call it. Come on, self. I'm trying to press the wrong buttons. We're showing our viewers how much I get in here. We can change this later.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's what I was thinking too. And then we'll add
in our entities. Oops. There we go. Entity.
Perfect.
Let's save and publish this guy. And then we can save, can play our app from here. It's already published. Thought it was
Or
already
is
published.
it?
Uh-oh. Let's.
Okay, hold on. Do we have to go back and publish the whole solution?
Maybe. Or we can just refresh and see if it magically works. There we go.
Ah, there we go.
Just something cached in there. Cool.
There we
So
go.
you can see our registration. And then, you know, when we want to be nice, we'll want to make sure we update our entity icons to look better. Cool. We can look for our contacts. We have our season and we see our tooltip.
Yeah,
We
great.
don't have our seasons created yet.
Yeah, we'll have to create some, and then how much they paid. Now, here's an interesting thing on that name field. So oftentimes you'll have the name field, and its relevance is it's important because when you're looking at registrations from the contact, I know one of the things users have struggled with in the past is like, how do I open records? And there's a difference between opening the record I'm looking at and, you know, single click or double click. And so if that name field is typically the field that when looking at it in an associated view, so if I'm looking at contacts and I've got a list of all the registrations, that name field is going to be basically the hyperlink to open that specific registration record. And what I've seen in the past is inconsistent use of that field can be problematic because it just gets confusing. It doesn't really mean anything, but it gets confusing to look at, and it makes your data look disheveled, if you will. And so what do you think, Kylie, about taking that name field and maybe making it not required and putting a business rule in here to take the applicant hyphen season applied for, and maybe that's it in terms of data, but just to automate the creation of that name field so that it's nice and clean and consistent. So when you're looking at any contact and the registration, that record always looks the same.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, because I see so often that happens, or you don't have any data there, and then your views look weird, and when you open it, it says no name or something like that. So yeah, I think that makes sense. I don't think we need to do that today, but I think that's a great idea. We should do that.
Yeah, and it came up even on like you see that not just on custom entities, but even opportunities is a good example. The topic field is an out-of-the-box text field. I just had this conversation earlier today in my real life job around, you know, how are we treating that topic field? It looks like it's a text field, so people can put whatever we want in there, and trying to explain to somebody that field doesn't really have any bearing on anything other than just having a name for that record, but it does have bearing in terms of the cleanliness, at least the appearance of cleanliness in your system. So it's not just a custom entity thing; it's really across the board.
Yeah.
Cool. So we've got our entities, a couple custom entities built out. We've got the start, that model-driven app. We've got our sitemap updated with those entities. We can start filling in some data. We've got some registrations coming in. I know that we had the registration forms created from the association. So I think in an upcoming video, perhaps we're going to dive into how we might deal with those paper applications and get that data in, which is super exciting.
Yeah, so I think we covered a lot of great ground today. So thank you all for joining us. Hopefully this was helpful to see us working through some of the details for creating a field, gave you some ideas for what you should think about before you jump in and start creating things, and also showed you that, you know, we're always learning too. And so hopefully, you know, we'd love to hear how this is helpful for you, or other things you'd want to see, or other ideas that you have for the Power Baseball League. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.